From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Another criminal investigation against the former president of Peru, Alberto Fujimori, is underway, this time related to mass forced sterilizations of indigenous women that were carried out during his term in office. Prosecutor Marcelita Gutierrez has accused Fujimori and 3 of his former ministers of this crime. According to the Ombudsman's office, nearly 300,000 forced sterilizations were performed between 1996 and 2001. The women were reportedly threatened and sometimes forced into undergoing the procedure. Audio recordings have been released in Colombia accusing Attorney General Néstor Humberto Martínez of knowing about the Odebrecht bribery scheme since 2015. The information was revealed during an interview with a key witness in the corruption case, Jorge Enrique Pizano, who died a week ago. Pizano said that he met the Attorney General in 2015 and warned him of bribery. At the time, Martinez was being considered for the position of Attorney General. The Attorney General has rejected the accusations. In a public statement, Martinez said he did not inform the authorities about bribes because Pizano was not sure the bribery scheme was real. Palestinian groups in Gaza have agreed in a joint statement to accept a ceasefire brokered by Egypt and the United Nations. However, they only agreed to halt the cross-border attacks that have intensified over the last 48 hours, if the Israeli forces do the same. Since the attacks began on Sunday, at least 14 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli airstrikes and at least 1 Israeli by Palestinian counterattacks. Meanwhile, hundreds of Palestinians have attended the funeral of one of those killed during Sunday's violence. 22-year-old Mohammed Ouda was buried in the city of Beit el-Leha in the Gaza Strip. The fighting began when an Israeli special operations team was discovered inside Gaza. They called in airstrikes to cover the retreat. One of the Israeli soldiers and Hamas military commander were among the dead in the first round of violence. Palestinian fighters responded with a barrage of rockets fired into the southern Israel. One Israeli man was killed when a residential building suffered a direct hit in the coastal town of Ashkelon. Hamas has threatened to extend its rocket fire to the towns of Be'er Bishaf and Ashdod, further inside Israel. In Mexico, a group of journalists is hoping to bring closure and justice to grieving relatives of missing persons who are suspected victims of violence. They've designed a website to help these families track the location of mass graves.
1 out of 7 Mexican municipalities have been plagued by widespread violent crime, and mass graves are a gruesome reminder of the bloodshed and brutality. A recent investigation by journalists has revealed that an average of 1 mass grave is unearthed every 2 days.
We found that from 2006 to 2016, at least 1,978 mass graves were found in 2,000 states around the country. That is, in 1 out of 7 municipalities ruled by criminals. They not only murdered people, but also buried them.
8 out of 32 states denied that they took part in the investigation. The figures show that there were 232 more mass graves than the government cares to admit.
They took so long to incinerate people and waited for more remains to be buried. What are the authorities doing? What are the alliances? Who has trained all that people to do that in the same period of time?
These and other questions are without answers. According to the investigation, there are nearly 2,000 mass graves. State prosecutors recovered over 2,800 bodies, 300 skulls, 200 skeletons, and over 800 bones. Thousands remain unidentified. Relatives of missing persons challenge the government for what they say it's a lack of cooperation in the matter.
All these human lives are being lost, and we do not know what happened to them. The public prosecutor tells us how many were buried, and in the news we see another figure. We do not have a rule of law in the country. We do not know the truth, which is what the country deserves.
In our case, the majority of mothers have gone with shovels in hand, and on many occasions we have found these graves. Us, mothers, with our own hands, we ourselves dig in, and we have single-handedly recovered the remains of our sons and daughters. It is very sad to see that the state is the one who is to blame for failing to prioritize this very serious matter.
Sadly, these illegal burials are a common occurrence in Mexico, since former President Felipe Calderón launched his failed strategy to fight against drug cartels in 2006.
Mass graves can also hide evidence. They are also a means of silencing justice, and I think it is working in many Mexican regions.
Mass graves continue to be discovered. This decade is said to be the most violent this country has ever witnessed. Statistics show that 37,000 people have gone missing in 12 years.
The migrant caravan in Mexico is covering more and more ground as it heads north towards the U.S. border. Our correspondent Pablo Perez is in Jalisco with the main body of the first caravan.
We are on the outside the shelter set up in the Benito Juarez Auditorium in Zapopan, near Guadalajara, Jalisco. The first migrant caravan slept here last night. We can now see how they are boarding buses laid on by the state of Jalisco, which will take them to the El Arenal, and from there they will have to make their own way to the state of Nayarit, where the authorities have also offered them transport to cross the state. We should remember that Nayarit was recently hit by a hurricane. For that reason, their shelters are full and they won't be able to provide lodging for the migrants, only transport. In this way, they are now covering ever greater distances as they head closer to the US border. To understand better what has been happening, we've prepared this report. Migrants heading north are trying to find transportation that can help them travel longer distances. The US border is still far away, although there are people who don't want to cross it. They would rather stay in Mexico.
There are jobs here and everything we need. They have even offered us residency. Many have accepted, but they still want to remain near the border.
The organization People Without Borders is helping the caravan to remain safe during their 2,000-kilometer journey.
Compañeros, agárrense por favor, tengan mucho cuidado, acuérdense que la vida ante todo. Por favor, agárrense y cuídense, compañeros. Cuídense en el camino, por favor. Agárrense.
Truck drivers often stop to pick up some of them from one town to the next one.
I help them because I want them to fulfill their dream, to come out from poverty, even if it's a big risk to give them a ride in the back of a truck.
Families also face a risk, especially with their children.
I'd rather risk my life here with my family than live in Honduras with the crime and the leaders that rule our country.
In this stretch of the road, they are walking a distance 6 times longer than they did in their first days. So ever greater distances that they are covering. In fact, it is possible that they even get as far as Sinaloa today. By crossing the whole of Nayarit, that would be a big advance. But at the moment, they are still almost 2,000 kilometers from their goal, which is Tijuana, on the border with California and the United States. We'll keep you up to date.
The trial of the Mexican drug lord Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán has started in New York. Federal prosecutors say El Chapo shipped massive amounts of heroin, cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine to the U.S. He faces 17 criminal counts and a potential life sentence if convicted. El Chapo was extradited from Mexico almost 2 years ago. The trial will be held under strong security, including armed protection for judges. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, has announced that he will continue with his hunger strike and that he will no longer take any liquids. He started the hunger strike 24 days ago in protest at being transferred from a jail in Quito to the maximum security prison in La Tacunga. He said he's fighting for his dignity. Brazilian President-elect Jair Bolsonaro presented his new defense minister. General Fernando Azevedo da Silva will take office on January the 1st. He is the third military man and the sixth minister designated by Bolsonaro. Azevedo da Silva is currently Counselor of the Supreme Court of Justice, and he has already been Army Chief of Staff. General Azevedo da Silva will be the second military man at the head of the Defense Ministry since its creation in the 1999. Social movements have taken to the streets in Brazil to protest against a controversial law that, if approved, will greatly censor topics discussed in schools. If the law is approved, teachers won't be able to use words such as oppression or gender, or even talk about political issues in classrooms. The law is currently being discussed in Congress. Early on Tuesday, a group of teachers and students were prevented from entering Congress to participate in the discussion.
Democracy is being attacked. We couldn't get past here and enter the room where the debate is happening. Democracy is at risk. We came with representatives from teachers and student organizations, and we were prevented from entering. They don't want to give us the right to protest against something that for us represents a major attack.
The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights has said it is concerned with the situation in Brazil following the recent election of Jair Bolsonaro. The Commission said it is particularly worried about the future of Brazil's minorities once Bolsonaro assumes power on January 1st. In the run-up to the polls, Bolsonaro continuously made derogatory comments against Afro-Brazilians, women, and the LGBT community.
We're concerned because of these statements and what we in the international human rights community designate clear hate speeches that were made. So we're very concerned, and this is why we'll closely monitor.
A new law was approved in Nicaragua to control mining exploration and exploitation. We have more in this report.
Rubén González is the president of a small mining cooperative known as Pequeños Mineros de la Libertad. Despite his age, he has continued to work since 1992 as a miner. But a mining company from Canada is trying to prevent González to work. They say González doesn't comply with the Article 43 of a recent law approved in the country regarding small-scale mining.
This is very offensive. These companies talk about defending the environment, but it is them who are not protecting it. I don't know if in Canada they allow this to happen, but they come here and do whatever they want. That is terrible.
Other mining workers have been affected by the operation of the Canadian company B2 Gold. Small-scale miners have denounced these activities cause landslides in the area where they work to fulfill their daily activities. Those affected have met with the company's representatives to solve this problem.
A court in Peru has rejected an appeal presented by opposition leader Keiko Fujimori against the judge who sent her to preventive detention. The judge in charge of the Second Penal Court of Appeals said there is no real evidence or reason to prove Keiko's case was not independent. Keiko Fujimori was sentenced to 36 months in preventive detention for alleged money laundering. Members of the public health system in Peru have been on a strike for 6 days after being repressed by security forces. More on this report.
Peruvian security forces fired tear gas canisters and rubber bullets against public hospital workers, stopping them from getting near to the premises of the Ministry of Health. Workers have been on strike for 6 days without reaching an agreement with government officials.
The government prioritizes political issues instead of prioritizing people's health. We will continue marching. We will discuss these issues in different meetings because we have the conviction within us. We are worthy and we deserve some respect.
Delegations of hospital workers from across Peru have joined the strike in Lima. They set up tents outside the Ministry of Health, where they plan to remain indefinitely until the government finds a solution for their demands.
From Puno, the most forgotten region, where anemia has increased by 73%, where there are 22 maternal deaths caused by pneumonia. From there, we support this measure to show this government that we need some answers. We raise our voices and will continue fighting.
Delegations from the north of the country have also arrived, expecting the government to deliver bonds that by law belong to the health workers for having worked in extraordinary conditions under the El Niño phenomenon of 2017.
In Piura, we had 547 health workers that got sick with dengue. And even while carrying that sickness, we had to show up to work. We had 3 co-workers who died, 2 of them with dengue, and who was driving an ambulance when he was caught by a landslide. His body was never found. And the only thing the government has done is to declare him a national public health hero.
These workers demand an increase in public health funds to get hospitals out of crisis. They also demand salaries increase and the hiring of 95,000 more workers under new agreements to give them work stability.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has said the major joint natural gas deal signed with Venezuela will usher a new era in regional cooperation. He was speaking at the 20th Ministerial Meeting of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. Trinidad and Venezuela signed a major energy cooperation deal back in August. The United States, once a major importer of gas, is now competing exporting, but the Caribbean can now become a major competitor.
The Dragon deal is a prime example of the symbiotic relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and its nearest neighbor, Venezuela, and an indication of cooperation among neighbors, but more importantly, among 2 founding members of the GECF member countries. Additionally, the Caribbean region is becoming a hotbed for hydrocarbon exploration. Recent successes in exploration in Guyana has prompted interest in Suriname, Cuba, Barbados, Grenada, and Guyana. These countries can benefit from Trinidad's experience in the hydrocarbon arena, while providing opportunities for Trinidad and Tobago in many aspects of the hydrocarbon value chain.
Our correspondent in Trinidad and Tobago, Kichan Haynes, brings us the details.
Now, the theme of this meeting could all be about change and adapting to change. With the United States moving from a major importer of natural gas to exporter and other shifts in the status quo, it means Trinidad now needs to figure out how to export gas to new countries. Now, some of those countries are in Asia or Africa, and that's of course much further away than the US, which means
Apparently we have some technical difficulties. Moving on, the Caribbean Court of Justice has ruled that a law in Guyana which makes it illegal for any person to appear in public while dressed as the opposite sex is unconstitutional. The ruling in the case, brought by 4 trans women and the Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination versus the Attorney General of Guyana, determined that the law was vague and violated the appellate's rights to protection under the law. Military police in the northeast of Brazil have used force to try to break up a land occupation. About 100 police moving to the Novo Pindarmi camp in the state of Piauí to evict 250 landless families who have been occupying the area for 2 years. At least 1 person was reportedly injured. In the last week, eviction orders have been issued against 2 other land occupations in Brazil. We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. And now let's take a look at some other stories making headlines from around the world.
Italian police have bulldozed a camp in Rome which has served as a transit home to tens of thousands of migrants during their journeys to the rest of Europe. Authorities had to evacuate more than 100 people who still lived at the camp. It was run by the Baobab Experience Association near the city's two main train stations. The United States has expressed its willingness to remove Sudan from its blacklist of state sponsors of terrorism. The U.S. blacklisted Sudan in 1993 over its alleged links with Islamist extremists. Although in October 2017, many sanctions were lifted, officials say blacklisting prevents the country's economy from recovering as much funding is blocked from global financial institutions.
Sudan that has settled all the outstanding claims in the United States and fully compliant on North Korea is a Sudan that will be much better positioned internationally than it is right now.
Passengers of an Air France flight from Paris to Shanghai have been stranded in Siberia for 3 days. This after their plane had to make an emergency landing on Sunday. Although a replacement aircraft arrived the next day, it couldn't take off due to technical problems. Passengers do not have Russian visas, so they are not allowed to leave their hotels and are accompanied by police everywhere. Reportedly, a third plane is on its way to pick them up.
We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.